There was a rumor in the village of Nkombo that Zuberi's manhood was so extraordinary that it could not be measured by normal means. The women spoke of it with a kind of feverish obsession, as if they had seen it themselves. And who could blame them? In the light of the moon, even the shadows seemed to whisper about it, how it grew when the wind blew, how it moved when he walked. They spoke of him as though he were a myth made flesh. At first, Zuberi laughed off the gossip. He was just a man, a quiet man with broad shoulders and a voice that spoke only when necessary. He worked the land, plowing the earth beneath the fierce sun, and came home to the quiet of his heart in the evenings. But every time he crossed paths with a woman, their eyes would grow wide and their hearts would race. Some would smile, others would whisper, but all of them looked at him as if he were something other than human. There were those who came to him with sly glances and lips that trembled with unspoken words. He noticed them, of course. He could not escape the way they looked at him, like wolves scenting a rabbit. They would visit him under the cover of night, slipping into his heart with a promise of warmth and intimacy, but by the time the rooster crowed, they would leave in a rush, disappearing like shadows before the light. Sometimes, they didn't even say goodbye, just a hurried glance over their shoulder and a trembling hand clutching their clothes. One woman, Tari, came to him in the dead of night, her gaze filled with longing. She had heard the stories, just like the others. She crept into his bed, and for a while, Zuberi believed it was simply a matter of the heat of the moment, the human need for closeness. But when the night turned to dawn, she screamed, a wild, shuddering scream, as she bolted from his bed and ran into the night. "It's true. It's true," she yelled as she vanished into the mist. Her voice carried through the trees like a bird trapped in a cage. Zuberi sat up, his chest heaving with confusion. He had felt nothing unusual. Nothing. But something had frightened her deeply, something beyond mere physicality. As the days passed, more women came, some in the dead of night, some in the heat of the afternoon, all looking for what they had heard about, each leaving just as quickly as they had arrived. He never got a chance to understand what they saw. It was as if his body had become a haunted house, and every time someone entered, they were frightened by what they believed to be true. Then, there was Malaika. She came to him not as a stranger but as a woman who had seen the myths dance in the whispers. Unlike the others, she did not run. She stayed. Her body pressed close to his, her lips on his, and for a moment, Zuberi believed that perhaps this was it, perhaps the myths would die in the truth of her touch. But as dawn broke, Malaika turned her head slowly, her eyes wide in disbelief. It's too much," she gasped, and without a word, she fled. Her steps echoed in his ears, louder than her gasp, and in that moment, Zuberi felt a chill he had never known. The fear was beginning to settle in him now. What was it about him that terrified these women? Why did they run from him, fleeing from a thing he could not even see? Every night, he lay awake, staring at the ceiling, tortured by the idea that maybe, just maybe, the rumors were true, that there was something different about him. Then came Nia. Her arrival was not like the others. She wasn't drawn to him by the myths, nor was she chasing after something exaggerated. Zuberi met her one afternoon when he helped her carry a load of firewood from the forest. She had stumbled under the weight of the branches, and when he saw her, his heart went out to her. He offered to help, and though she initially hesitated, she agreed, grateful for his kindness. The two of them walked back to the village in silence, their footsteps soft in the grass. From that moment, Zuberi felt something stir within him, the desire to know this woman, someone who didn't look at him as a legend, but as a person. Days turned into weeks, and Nia began to appear in his thoughts. They talked as they worked the fields, shared meals, and laughed at the simplicity of life. But for Zuberi, it was more than that. He had come to admire her gentle nature, her resilience. There was no desire in her gaze, only respect. And that was the most refreshing thing he had ever known. Then, on one evening when the sky was painted in shades of orange and purple, Zuberi and Nia found themselves sitting together by the fire, their words as soft as the night wind. There was no rush, no fiery need in Nia's eyes, just a quiet understanding between them, a peace that had eluded him with the others. And then, something strange happened. In the stillness of the moment, their hands brushed. Zuberi felt his heart race, but Nia didn't recoil. She didn't pull away. He stared into her eyes, waiting for the same gust, the same terror that had come from the others, but it didn't come. She just looked at him. "Is something wrong?" she asked gently. He shook his head, his heart pounding. "You don't see it?" he asked, his voice faltering. Nia smiled softly. "See what?" "Thank you," Zuberi said quietly, a smile spreading across his face for the first time in what felt like forever. "You see me." Nia's smile grew, warm and knowing. "I see you," she replied. From the fireside, they went into the room, entangled in the sheets, and for the first time, Zuberi found a peace he had never known. The closeness between them, the warmth of Nia's touch, felt natural, unforced. It was real. There were no screams, no sudden flights in the night, no overwhelming terror. Just the soft rhythm of their bodies, a simple exchange of trust. But then, as the moonlight spilled through the window and touched her face, the realization hit him like a thunderclap. The women had never truly seen him. They had only seen their own fantasies, their own desires that had twisted him into something he was not. He wasn't the giant they had feared, or he was simply a man, just as he had always been. Nia's calm and untroubled gaze met his, and in that moment, Zuberi understood everything. It wasn't his body that had caused the chaos, it was the women's projections of their lust, their exaggerations of what they thought they wanted. As they lay there, caught in the quiet aftermath, Zuberi smiled, a deep, contented smile. He had been chasing a myth, believing in something that wasn't real. But now, in Nia's presence, he found the truth, a love built on understanding, free from illusions. And it was in that simplicity, that purity, that he found his peace. "Thank you," he whispered, his heart full. Nia smiled softly, her fingers tracing patterns on his chest. "I see you, Zuberi, I always have." And with that, he realized, that the truth had always been clearer than the myth, that lust often clouds the truth, and when desire distorts perception, what we see is not always the reality.